Hey guys, how's it going? So, I do want to talk a little bit about police officers and dealing with them. More importantly, this isn't a guide. This isn't saying do this and you'll be fine. This isn't saying this is how you should act and shit like that. I'm not talking about why things happen. I'm not going to be going into racial profiling, biased perceptions, why cops shoot people, and etc., etc. All I'm doing is offering a little bit of perspective so that you can understand exactly why sometimes cops tend to shoot people when at a glance you're thinking this is insane, it's outright murder. Now, there's some cases where it's easily obvious to me when I see a video and I instantly go, yep, that's justified. Even though the guy was unarmed, and it makes perfect fucking sense to me, and so many other people will see it and go, why the fuck did you shoot him? There's other cases that get more murky, and there's other cases where it's obvious to anyone and everyone why they get shot. But let's talk about exactly what you need to understand, and especially what I want to say, this isn't a survival guide, this is just about people's attitude and comments on videos of cops shooting people or even just using aggressive force. And also why they don't shoot for the leg and things like that, because it's been really bothering me, the amount of sheer ignorance and hate that gets thrown around on videos about officers doing their job, even when they actually did it right, and it looks like they didn't. So that before you next want to freak out and jump on and go, what the fuck was wrong with this cop, he should have done that, he should have done that, why did he do this, why did he treat him like that, just so you gain a little bit of perspective. The first thing you need to understand about any officer-involved altercation that you will never see on these videos when there's an officer-involved shooting is you don't know why the officer's there. We see the video start when the altercation's already started. What you don't know is what was the officer sent out there for. Somebody called 911. Somebody called them out there. Dispatch sent them out there. You don't know what was reported. Half the time, if not half, hell, I wouldn't be surprised if it's most of the time, when an officer shows up and it becomes an altercation or an officer-involved shooting, the person who made the 911 call is partially responsible for a wrongful shooting. Because the officer shows up on scene looking for a guy with a gun, because somebody called in a guy with a gun, even though there isn't one. The officer may show up looking for a guy that just robbed a store, and are trying to match a description to get the wrong guy. There's countless times where an officer's on scene, and his mindset is, something is already happening here, and he's wrong because he's been misinformed. Or he's right, and that also alters his perspective. I mean, half the time, and no, every time I say half the time, again, it's just me talk, it's not actual stats, but say half the time, an officer shows up on scene, and the guy he's talking to does have a firearm, and the officer was called for a guy who has a firearm, so the officer's already a bit jumpy. So that's step one. Step two, what you need to understand about officers is you need to understand how easy it is to kill police officers. Cops are the easiest people in the world to kill. You always have the jump on a police officer. You always do. You're going to see them before they see you, namely if they pulled you over and you're in a car. When they're approaching you, you have room to maneuver, everything else, you can step away, out of sight. All it ever takes is 1 second. 1 second. 1,000. Just 1 fucking second for you to be out of sight or move your hands out of sight, and boom, he's dead. Close range, you don't even have to aim. Every single time a cop pulls you over, when he approaches your window, he's potentially dead. Because the second he just goes, hey, how are you doing? You've already got a gun next to your thigh. Bam, he's dead. It happens too. It happens many times to cops who have been shot just like that on a traffic stop. They walk up to the window, gun out the window, they drop. It's very difficult for an officer to approach any situation before they can see your hands and not know if they're walking into the barrel of a fucking firearm. Because of this, and officers know this, because of this, officers are very, very cautious, very paranoid. And to us, who, if we're not into that, we don't get it. We don't understand that their perspective is they're trying to approach you in a way where they can't get shot. So if you're standing out in the open between a couple of cars and an officer approaches you, and he's like, hey, how are you doing? And you step away behind a car for just a moment, that officer's going to go for his gun. Because you just stepped out of his sight. Now, first off, that's not normal. You don't step away from a cop unless you're about to run or something else. But now you're out of his sight. Maybe you just drew a firearm. And all you have to do now is side strafe right back out and shoot him dead. So if you do anything when a cop is on site, like move your hands around, or move your hands out of sight, or put your hands down or behind you, they are going to instantly worry that you may be going for a knife or a firearm. Especially in cars, especially when we're out in the open with lots of rooms for you to maneuver. There's another reason why they always tend to pull their guns out if you're running. If you're running, you're already trying to get away from the cops. And no, that is a fucking admission of guilt. Fuck all that noise of, why'd you blah blah blah, because no, if you run, you're guilty. Cops always say that, if you're not guilty, why'd you run? They're right. Think about it. Unless you know that he's going to arrest you, you already have zero fucking reason to run. So if you're running, you're already trying to get away. Now, in the cop's mentality, okay, you're running away from me, you want to get away. Does this also mean that once I catch up to you, or once you get cornered, are you going to fight back? And if you're going to fight back, are you going to go for a gun? So you have to keep in mind that cops definitely are very, very cautious, to the point of almost paranoia, of small movements to us that seem nonchalant, reaching to a glove box. If your hand is out of sight, you have to realize just how fast it is to snap up a gun and shoot at close range. It's not aim and everything else. You won't even see guns, or just snap, fire, and they're down. Moving on, cops are human beings. And this is more into their attitude of when you have an asshole-ish cop or a nice cop or everything else. I work in retail. I'm dead inside. I hate human beings half the time now because of just the amount of stupidity and nonsense I deal with. Cops are basically, I read a book once way back that said it perfectly. Cops are society's proctologist. They deal with the worst kinds of scum, the worst kinds of filth, day in, day out. So when you have a cop pull up to you, you don't know if yesterday he had to watch a little girl die. You don't know if he had to respond to a rape case. You don't know if he had to respond to a bunch of drugged out junkies vomiting and running around the streets naked and him trying to deal with that. They see domestic abuse. They see stupid people. They have people argue with them. They have people yell at them constantly, day in, day out. That's going to wear on you. So sooner or later, the tolerance for some officers for dealing with your bullshit, which to us is minor shit, it's like, why'd you pull me over? Oh, that's bullshit, fuck you, fuck that ticket. It's gonna really fucking piss them off. Are they right? No, I'm not talking about right or wrong, I'm just explaining. Some cops can handle that shit, some get worn down, some will just have a bad fucking day. Especially when you don't have any idea what call they're coming from. Because there's nothing like dealing with a child pornography case and then having to try and give you a traffic ticket and you giving them shit and in their head they're still thinking about that fucking atrocity they just saw. So that said, next time... Oh, one more thing also. Being shot in the back. Many, many times, it's almost just a fact of physics at this point. If you have a gun and you're involved with an officer shooting... and you pull a gun on an officer, very often you will end up shot in the back. The reason for this is that if the officer sees the gun, or you're looking at him with a gun, and then he stops to draw, very, very commonly, your snap reaction, if you're the criminal here, and no, not even criminal, just if you're the guy involved with this officer, the officer's drawing his gun, you're out in the open, your first instinct, get the fuck to cover or out of the way. So what do? Your gun's up. What the officer will do is he will draw. And no, once you point a gun at the officer and he's drawing, it doesn't matter if you're aiming at the gun at him anymore or not. He's made that decision. He had the gun pointed at him. He's about to shoot you. That reaction's locked in. He's drawing. You had a point at him. You turn. He draws through. You're now turned to run away, and he fires. Bullet goes into your back. So when you see officer shoots a man in the back, that's why that happens. They're not trying to murder people who are running away. That's literally, they were facing him when he was drawing, and they turn back to run when he fires. So all that said, next time you hear or read a story about unarmed people being shot by officers, and note, again, I'm not justifying protecting any of them until I myself can see them. There are many cases that you can look at and say, yeah, that's bullshit. But when you see one that to you makes your blood boil because you're like, what the fuck? You shot him for that? I've seen videos where a guy gets out of a car and does this with his empty hand. The officer didn't shoot him. He tased him. The second I saw him do this, if that officer had his gun out, that man would have been shot, and as far as I'm concerned, that's justified. Because in that split second, you can't see the gun, you can't see what he's holding. No, they're going to fucking shoot because the officer doesn't want to die. You need to keep in mind why the officer was on scene. You need to keep in mind if you can't see the guy's hands. And also you need to keep in mind, if the guy's resisting at all, arguing, struggling, fighting, not obeying commands, the only thing in the officer's head is, this is escalating. Is he going to go for a gun next? And the second your hands go out behind your back, you run the risk of being shot. So, don't keep freaking out and posting these goddamn comments and reading these news stories and escalating the situation to the point where you want to riot until you review videos for yourself. Fuck what the news says. The news has no idea what they're talking about until you see the video for yourself and determine exactly why that happened. Final point. Shooting people in the leg, and why didn't you just tase them? Or why didn't you just pepper spray them? Especially when they have a knife. You see this all the time. You had a knife. You've seen my knife videos. You know my views on knives. You know the toler distance. 21 feet. Knives are fucking deadly. Why don't we tase them? You will see them tase them. You see guys with knives get tased all the fucking time when there's more than one officer on scene. When you have two officers at least, typically that's when one will have their gun on the guy and the other will try and tase him. Tasers are short range. You don't want to get close enough to a knife to try and tase them. Tasers have one cartridge. Some models have possibly 2 shots before you need to reload. If you get close enough to fire a taser and your gun's not already in your hand at a guy with a knife and it misses or it's ineffective, you're fucking done. You've got no time to draw your weapon. You've got no time to reload for another shot. He's got you. Pepper spray, also short range, runs the risk of wind blowing it back into your eyes, takes a few seconds to kick in, and the only thing it does, the only thing pepper spray effectively does, is blind people. It won't drop them. It will blind them. Against a deadly weapon like a knife, we're gonna get our fucking guns out. Finally, the leg. Leg shots don't work for 2 reasons. 1, leg shots kill people. Leg shots are deadly fucking wounds. You will die in less than a minute if you are shot in the leg and it happens to hit your tibial or femoral artery. It will fucking drop you really fucking quickly. The problem is, it kills you in about 60 seconds or so before we can get you to medical attention. In those 60 seconds, you got a gun, you're going to shoot the officer and kill him. You got a knife and you can still maybe run around on that shot leg, you're going to run up to him and stab him and kill him. So shooting people in the leg isn't going to save their lives. It's still probably going to fucking kill them. Now, shooting people in the leg is a lot more fucking difficult than shooting them in the torso. Finally, officers shoot to stop threats. That's why we always shoot. You have a deadly weapon. We need to stop him from fucking killing you. In that moment, the point is there's no such thing as wounding shots. There's no such thing as warning shots. They don't exist. Firearms are a lethal weapon. They are only shot to stop a threat. And the only way to stop a threat with a firearm, by nature of it being a firearm, is to generally, in the process, end up killing the target. That's why we don't shoot for the leg. That's why we don't shoot for the fucking shoulder. It's a hard shot. It's difficult to do that under a stressful situation anyway, and it's going to kill the guy regardless. That's it. Thank you.